Good morning, everybody. I'm Sheila Wybrow, a member of the Board of Trustees of Tahoma UU Congregation. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from occupied Puyallup ancestral land. I pay respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We welcome all who are joining us with a longing for community, the hope for peace, and who are seeking justice. We are a diverse congregation which encourages each one who comes through our doors to find their own truth and belief. We invite all to join us in a search for meaning and community, guided by reasons, respect for each other, and by love. While we continue to meet online due to the surge of COVID cases from the Delta variant, we are glad to have this virtual platform and welcome old friends local to Tacoma, as well as new friends from far outside our traditional geographic area. You can find all of our program announcements this week in our e-news and listed on our church calendar. And here are some of the highlights for this week. Following worship service today online, we have in-person opportunities to connect in community. You can join us for social time in Zoom meeting. We'll paste that link at the end of the worship service, or you can find it via the church calendar. At noon, you could join us for social time in person at Wapato Park. This Wednesday evening at 6:30, Doug Taylor leads the Free Thinking Mystics group, and you can find details on the website calendar or in the e-news. Chalice circles are forming, and you can find information for registering in both the e-news and on the church website under the news tab. We're planning to have options for chalice circles to meet online or for other chalice circle groups to meet in the church sanctuary using safe practices, including limiting group sizes, social distancing, and wearing face masks. See details in the e-news and let us know what days and times work best for you. Then Mary Ryan will be back in contact with you as the chalice circles are formed. Currently, the sanctuary is open for groups of 8 or less. Please schedule your meeting through Libby Ball. This fall, the Pacific Northwest UU congregations from Washington, Oregon, and Alaska are joining together to offer religious education programs on Sundays for elementary grades 1 through 5, Sundays for middle school grades 6 through 8, and Wednesday evenings for high school grades 9 through 12. See the e-news or the blog post on the website and contact Nancy Slocum to register. Adult volunteers can also register with Nancy Slocum. We're planning a fun all ages Halloween event on Saturday, October 30th, trunk or treat in the church parking lot. We'll have a costume parade and kids will be able to trunk or treat going from car to car to receive Halloween goodies. We need adults to bring and hand out commercially packaged treats from the rear of their vehicles. There will be prizes for the spookiest, most creative, and the most fun decorations. Register to be a vehicle in the parking lot, as we need to limit the number of vehicles to ensure proper social distancing, and we will be following our outdoor gathering guidelines. If there are children who cannot participate, let Nancy Slocum know so we can arrange to deliver a treat bag. Links for all of our programs can be found in our weekly e-news or our church calendar. Please read through the e-news when it arrives in your inbox each week. It's the primary channel for you to stay connected and informed on all that is happening in our congregation. Our staff works hard to ensure your e-news contains all the news and information you ask for and respect. Thank you. And thank you for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes everything possible, supports our staff and our programs, and the connections we make through our congregation. And one more thank you. Today is Clergy Appreciation Day. We want to thank Linda and Joe for their loving guidance, care, and courage during these unprecedented times and for their commitment to our community. We so appreciate all that you do. And now let us gather together in worship.
We now come to the portion of our service where we light our chalice. The words for the chalice lighting are in the chat. And as Reverend Joe Rettenmeyer lights his chalice, you can light yours at home. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and the holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those that have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. This is a time for you to give financial support to the church, to the congregation, to the staff that support you. This is a challenging time for all of us in oh so many ways, but the church continues to try and have things in place to support you spiritually and emotionally. So please take a little time to donate to TUUC. You can see on the screen the ways that you can do that, and your donations are very much appreciated. Thank you for the time and the effort you make to do that. I want to dedicate the offerings now that you have given to us or will give us in the future. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love that we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
Welcome to our service today, beloveds. We gather today to honor National Coming Out Day tomorrow. And we send our loving support and our open-hearted welcome to our LGBTQ plus friends and loved ones. We also gather today to honor Indigenous Peoples Day. I was visiting friends of mine at the Duwamish Longhouse yesterday, and I found a wonderful book. You can read that. It's called Habu, Native American Stories from Puget Sound. So I thought as our opening words, I would read the story of the ticklish bear. A man went walking out in the country. This person was walking. There he was walking. Then he came across a big bear. Frightened, he thought, oh, what am I going to do now? I had better prepare for the worst. He had heard many stories about how bear killed people. He was probably going to die. The bear was practically upon him. It stood up. There he was. The man tried to calm himself. What shall I do? He braced himself to accept his fate. Then he knew what to do. He walked forward. The bear was standing upright now. The man went forward and he hugged the bear. And then he tickled him. The bear lay down right away and went to sleep. The man thought, goodness, I had better run now while the bear is asleep. He ran quite a distance and then turned around to check on the bear. And there was the bear, beckoning him to return. That is the end of the story. And that story was told by Walter Williams in Skagit at his longhouse at Deming, Washington in 1982.
I now would like to introduce you to our first hymn of the day, sung by Isaiah Barnwell, the writer and composer, along with the General Assembly Choir.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Beloveds, I have history and truth to share. Some truth of the past on this day of honoring the Indigenous First Peoples of the land. So I invite you to come to center in the spirit of learning, reflecting, and listening deeply. There is much to learn today. At the beginning of the 15th century, A new intellectual movement was lifting Europe's cultures out of the Dark Ages and fueling expansions of its civilizations and societies. It became known as the Age of Enlightenment. By the year 1419, the most westward European society, the Kingdom of Portugal, had become proficient ocean explorers. Their knowledge of sailing technology and Atlantic Ocean winds and currents was masterful, and they became the first European kingdom to achieve long ocean sailing. They learned to sail the winds and currents down along the west coast of Africa to their first lands of discovery. Such long voyages by sea beyond the Mediterranean were new in 1419. The families ruling Portugal's kingdom, the monarchy, saw advantages for their wealth and power over the other monarchies and kingdoms in Europe by extracting raw materials, foods, animals, and slaves from Africa's west coast. Portugal had now invented the Atlantic slave trade. For decades, the monarchs of Portugal sought a way to make their ruling power official in the African lands and societies they were discovering. I'm using air quotes intentionally here, my friends. That took time. Then 36 years after their first contacts with Western Africa in 1455, the influence of several European monarchies, including Portugal, influenced Pope Nicholas V in Rome to issue a papal decree to all Catholics. This decree specifically approved Portugal's claims to the lands and civilizations it had discovered along the African coast. It was the first decree of its kind on the notion of who owned discovered lands. This decree not only encouraged the seizure of those lands by European monarchies, it also reiterated an earlier papal decree which gave monarchies permission to enslave the people living in discovered lands as subjects of their monarchy. In short, the decree of 1455 gave a handful of European monarchs permission to invade any land on earth not ruled by a European monarchy and replace any indigenous civilizations and societies with the power structures and cultures and religions of European kingdoms. Decrees from Catholic popes were extremely consequential in the 1400s, horrific in their righteousness and greed, impacting the entire world for all centuries that would follow. All so Europe's kingdoms could hoard wealth and power designed to benefit Europe's kingdoms with long ocean sailing technologies, which a handful of monarchs had funded. That was in the 1400s, the Age of Enlightenment. Now let's move ahead in history a bit by several centuries. to the 1700s and the age of discovery here in North America. The age of discovery arose out of what has become known as discovery doctrine. Discovery doctrine had been in practice ever since the 1400s, but the term first emerged in the early 1800s, when our United States were new, independent from Britain's monarchs. Discovery doctrine refers to a concept of international law found in a series of decisions by the United States Supreme Court. Now, friends, this is a little dense. This history is a little technical and legal and dense. So thank you for paying attention through this. So discovery doctrine refers to a series of decisions by the US Supreme Court, and the best known being the case of Johnson versus McIntosh in 1823. In that year, 1823, the Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice John Marshall, heard the case of two European settlers who had purchased land from the Piankashaw people in what is now the state of Indiana. Johnson had arranged a purchase of land with the Piankashaw before America's War for Independence, and McIntosh had arranged a purchase of some of the same land decades later after America's independence. Chief Justice Marshall, in his written opinion about the unanimous vote of the all-European male descendant justices, noted the ways Europe's monarchies had laid claim to lands during the Age of Enlightenment, 400 years before. He cited that decree by Pope Nicholas in 1455 and applied the doctrine of that era, which he referred to as a discovery doctrine, to the feverish westward expansion of the United States that drove American society in 1823. In his comments, Chief Justice Marshall also noted that in 1792, only a few years after the Revolutionary War, the United States' new Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, had declared that Europe's laws about discovery would be adapted and adopted by the newly formed United States. And with that decision, a new American imperialism was born. But in the 1823 Johnson versus McIntosh case, the Supreme Court reasoned that the concept of ownership of land comes into existence as soon as that land is discovered, as had been decreed centuries prior by Europe's top authority, the Pope, and mutually practiced by wealthy European monarchs and kingdoms ever since. The Supreme Court reasoned that the United States was, therefore, the true legal owner of the land of the British colonies because it inherited that ownership from Britain, the original discoverer, by winning the war for independence. Beloveds, thank you for your attention to this swath of history I've just focused our minds to. I bring it to light this morning because it's truth, which is important for any US descendant of immigrants and any ally to Indigenous people to keep in mind. I am a descendant of European settlers in North America. I was educated by my European American family and society and schools in the customs and cultures of my German, French immigrant ancestors. I was educated like most immigrant descendants in America have been. I learned about the continual successions and secessions of lords and rulers of Europe's indigenous tribes, like the Etruscans, the Gauls, the Normans, the Saxons, the Balkans, and more. Tribes of indigenous people who conquered one another, intermarried, and treated themselves into the monarchy kingdoms many of us derive from. But re-examining that history with an indigenous lens helps uncover something deeper. Many of us are living on North American land now due to those wars, invasions, and intermarriages of Europe's indigenous peoples way back then. Right now, I am standing here in this place today because my great-great-grandparents fled oppressive invasions of their indigenous Frank and Saxon lands. Can you think of similar movements by any of your ancestors? In the 1850s, my foremothers and forefathers made difficult journeys along with handfuls of their relatives and friends to leave their indigenous lands in Germany and France. Once they and other immigrants arrived in this new democracy built by European discovery doctrine, each of my German and French ancestors were given land, given it for free. They settled on lands in the Great Plains that appeared somewhat familiar to them, but which they knew nothing about. They had no family lineage tied to that land. So they began making some. They created farming communities with other Franco-German Catholic immigrants in Kansas and Iowa, which mimicked the farming communities they'd left behind in Europe. By the time my ancestors arrived in the Great Plains of North America, which they knew nothing about, they did not have to have relations with the indigenous Kansa or Osage civilizations and people. Because at the same time my ancestors were immigrating to those lands, the Kansa and Osage civilizations that had stewarded those plains for tens of thousands of years had been largely exterminated by European diseases. The Kansa and Osage who had survived were brutally being relocated to tiny reservations by our Euro-American systems of governance. The age of discovery was an age of invasion and replacement, which allowed my immigrant ancestors to easily transfer their European structures of power into new Euro-American powers and start building new wealth. Now, beloveds, I share my family history with you because it's one that many Euro-American families share. Do you find any of it resonating with you? If you want truth and equity in America, then we Euro-Americans need to heed the truth that we are now here thanks to European structures of invasion and replacement of discovered civilizations. And make no mistake, I love my ancestors. I cherish their wisdom. I take pride in their inspiring accomplishments. I revere their lovingness. I give thanks for the extremely difficult work they devoted their lives to in service to the greater good of the America of their day. I cherish the incredible souls my ancestors were. I am not criticizing the individuals my foremothers and forefathers were, and I don't want anyone listening to either. Rather, I wish to guide your attention to how our ancestors, loving and hardworking and struggling, how they were immigrants or refugees or slaves, fighting for their dreams of freedom within a system of civilization invasion and cultural replacement that had been set in motion long before them by monarchy societies in Europe. Beloveds, each of us will continue to have personal discoveries about our ancestors' truths throughout our lifetimes. Blessings be. And today, after learning some truths about the systems that carried us and our ancestors to this land, those truths can guide us to reconciliation. You and I can reconcile the heartbreaking histories with the ancestral histories of the indigenous people upon whose land we all live. We can cultivate relationships that center reconciliation, the action of making views or beliefs compatible with another, the restoration of loving, friendly relations. Authentic, beloved community grounded in reconciliation can reveal how every soul on earth can trace ancestry back to indigenous roots, clans, tribes of people somewhere. There is one mighty belief that has guided me in my revelations about this, and I hope it may guide you. No one group of humans is more righteous or superior than the other. Back when I was in seminary, we were required to do a one-year community service internship. So I sought out an internship at the Duwamish Tribe's Longhouse and Cultural Center in Seattle, where I live, because I wanted to be in relationship with the First Peoples upon whose lands I carry out my livelihood. And oh, the truths and experiences they have shared with me, truths they have strived to share with the millions of us immigrants who continue to pour into the entire Seattle metro area, which is all Duwamish land. Living as an ally and activist for the Duwamish people, their welcoming spirit of reconciliation, they have transformed my capacity for knowing and stewarding their ancestral lands. They've deepened my soul's awakening with their 14,000 years of lived truth and stewardship as one people among many in the Salish Sea, where I have chosen to live and thrive for a mere 35 years. Not even a blink of an eye compared to their timeless stewardship. How long have you and your ancestors lived on these Puyallup lands? What an incredible act of faith in love and reconciliation for revered Duwamish wise ones to welcome a descendant of immigrants like me, a descendant of invaders, welcoming me as an ally and a friend. Can you imagine how great a faith that requires? In light of the history I've shared today, can you imagine just how profound and ancient a faith in the power of loving welcome that Duwamish welcome arises from? And still, in their now 200-year struggle to get basic recognition as a tribe from oppressive United States governance, continues. So, beloveds, I offer you this. The first peoples of Tacoma, the Puyallup, are right here. You have chosen to live among them on their ancestral land. Have you chosen to cultivate relationships with them? Have you chosen to honor the civilization that has never stopped stewarding this land since the last ice age that created it 14,000 years ago? Now is the time, friends. On this Indigenous Peoples Day, I invite you to learn some truths of what it means to be Puyallup today. The Puyallup Cultural Center is just down the road, friends. It's so easy to get to. They designed and built and operate it so that non-Indigenous and Indigenous peoples can deepen our humble revelations and relations. May it be so. Well, friends, as I shared earlier, there is so much to learn today. And I invite you now, with hearts and minds remaining open, to set an intention for the week ahead, deriving what has been most meaningful to you from what has been shared here this morning. Our closing words today, friends, I offer the present, the now, embrace the truth, opening heart, humility, grace, peace. The journey as kindred souls living in place in this moment where truth and beauty dwell.
We now come to the end of our service, the time for us to extinguish this flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, will you join me in our closing song? From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. Friends, let us nurture a relationship and gather for some social time. Simply follow the link that's now in the chat box or drop by Wapato Park at noon.